Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dr. Liz Wangare Geshimo, a clinical psychologist based in Kenya. Today, we're going to discuss the topic of trauma. What is it? How does it manifest? And what can we do about it? The DSM talks about trauma in the following ways. It says that in order for you to manifest traumatic symptoms, you must have been directly involved in a traumatic experience. It could be a war, probably witnessed violence at home, could be victim of rape, a victim of violence like burglary or being mugged. It could also be you're going through a medical procedure like a surgery and something went wrong. So that is directly experiencing a traumatic event. Or it also says for you to be traumatized, you may have witnessed a traumatic event. For example, could have witnessed somebody being involved in a road accident, someone who is close to you, okay, could have witnessed someone that you know being a victim of abuse, and so on and so forth. So, according to the DSM, in order for you to be traumatized, you should either be the person who experienced the traumatic event directly or witness. And all of us, in one way or another, then fall into one of these categories, especially in this technological age, whereby somebody just randomly sends you some YouTube video or a link to a video on WhatsApp whereby somebody is being brutalized, and especially in the current global scene last year where we all witnessed George Floyd being murdered, on camera. So all of us, in one way or another, especially in this technological age, then could say have been traumatized because of all these things that we are being forced now to view with our gadgets. And therefore then, what are some of the things then that happens so that then we can say that indeed we are traumatized or are experiencing trauma? DSM talks about symptoms, and this could be physiological, whereby you find that you are having certain manifestations. For example, heartbeats are increased, you feel aroused, you feel like you need to be ready to defend yourself or to flee. Okay, those are some physiological manifestations, and these are triggered when you remember or have thoughts about a traumatic event. Some of the other ways that we can talk about in the mind, cognitively. Cognitive, when I say cognitive, I'm talking about the mind. You have intrusive thoughts, so you keep remembering or having flashbacks about the event. You have nightmares, whereby you are asleep, then you experience dreams of a certain event. Another way is you have memory loss. You don't quite have a recollection. You have gaps as far as knowledge is concerned with regards to the traumatic event. Confusion, whereby you can't be able to string, events or thoughts together. And mood swings, whereby you can't be able to regulate yourself emotionally. 1 minute you're at ease, the next, you're agitated and things of that nature. Then we have behaviorally, whereby you find that you lack interest in things that you previously enjoyed. And then also, based on whatever it is that triggered the traumatic event, you find yourself invested so much to make sure you avoid that. And then also we can talk about isolation and withdrawal, whereby you want to keep to yourself most of the time. Okay? And then physically, you find that you feel fatigued. You're constantly exhausted. It doesn't matter how long you rest or sleep, you still feel exhausted. And then you're extremely alert. You're on guard. I must make sure that this doesn't happen to me again. And then there's something that I remember when I worked in hospital. Doctors used to talk about Hapa syndrome, whereby somebody is complaining of aches and pains. Yet when they're taken through a physical examination or their lab work is done on them, there can't seem to be anything that is identified as causing these specific symptoms. And psychologically, we can say that this manifests in form of extreme fear. Okay? The event has already taken place and it has passed, yet you keep having this extreme fear that this event is going to recur. Then there is depression, guilt, anger, disbelief, as well as numbing. Okay, so when you have any one of these, if you've gone through a traumatic experience, you're likely to manifest any one of these symptoms. Okay, there is a specific diagnosis that is given to a result of trauma. According to the DSM, within the first week, they talk about acute stress disorder. However, if you still continue to manifest these symptoms, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. Another diagnosis that is given with regards to trauma, Dr. Joy DeGraw coined the term post-traumatic slave syndrome, and this he coined it to refer to some of the manifestations that a lot of people who experience slavery or are descendants of slaves manifest as a result of the events that transpired during the period before the abolition of slavery. And we have another professor, he's called James Small, who talks about post-colonialism traumatic syndrome with reference to manifestation of some symptoms as a result of people who underwent colonialism. That is beyond, these two especially are beyond the scope of this video, and perhaps in the future videos I can talk a little bit more about those specific diagnoses, the post-traumatic slave syndrome and post-colonialism traumatic disorder, just to unpack a little bit more how do those look like. But all of these, what they all have in common is trauma, and the symptoms that I have talked about are present in all of these disorders. And so what are then some of the effects of trauma? In the last video, if you haven't watched it, you can check it out. We talked about addiction, and addiction can be one of the effects of trauma. As a way of coping, one might develop addictive tendencies in order to, because they're trying to address some of the symptoms that are manifesting as a result of a traumatic event. Then another effect is social withdrawal, whereby you feel like you don't want to be around people, for one reason or the other. And then another effect could be impulsivity. You find that people who have been through a tragic or a tragedy and survived to tell the story, sometimes, have this thought process that today could be the last day, so I might as well just do whatever, without thinking through, what if you don't die? Are you willing to live with the consequences that will come as a result of indulging in some kind of behaviors and activities? Of course, it has an impact on how one relates with other people. It impacts on close relationship, because you find that when, for example, you are indulging in impulsive kind of behaviors, you probably spiral into addiction. Of course, that will have an impact on the relationships that you are involved in. It will cause a strain, it will cause problems and difficulties. And people who have been through trauma, sometimes because of how their consciousness has been harmed or fractured, find it difficult to trust and find it very difficult to maintain healthy and close relationships. Therefore, another thing that we find is compulsive behavior patterns, whereby it's live for the day, live for the moment, you know. You do things and then think about the consequences later. And find sometimes someone says, I'm sorry, I'm going to change, this wasn't me, I'm invested in making sure that this doesn't happen again and stuff like that, but then end up repeat. You know, it can be quite exhausting, especially for people who are around this individual. So what do we do? How do we address trauma? And here's the deal: as long as you're alive, I don't think you can avoid being traumatized. It's part of living. There's a researcher who has done a lot of work with trauma, and what he says is that our bodies have capacity to bounce back or to repair or to heal themselves after a traumatic event. They've been wired that way. And why then trauma becomes problematic is if the body does not get a space whereby it's able to repair or to recover or to heal itself. For example, if we are to talk about some of the things that we said as causing traumatic symptoms within our bodies, say an accident, if you are able to stay clear of, let's talk about specifically a road accident. If you're able to stay clear of a road or a space whereby you will experience that again, then the body is able to come back and to heal and clear whatever it is that triggered for it to go into that space of trauma. And your mind is also able to recover to realize that that event happened. It's an accident because it's not something that you had foreseen. However, it's not something that can happen again, and therefore your body is able to recover from the injury that was caused. How about if you're in an abusive home or abusive environment, family for that matter, and you're a child? If you're a child, it means you can't be able to take care of yourself. It means you're still very dependent, and therefore leaving that environment, that could be a challenge. And with some, for example, women who are in abusive relationships, one of the reasons why they still stay in that environment is because they say they're not financially stable, they will not be able to take care of themselves, so they stay in that environment. So you see, in those kinds of scenarios, it becomes quite a challenge for the body to recover, because as long as you're still in the space that is causing the injury, there is no healing that can take place, because you're constantly, even if you make steps forward, then the injury is repeated, and so you get re-traumatized. Okay, and so what about, say, for example, you're in a work environment where it's very hostile, or could be the boss or the demands of the company, you know, keep injuring you. And the reason why you can't quit is because you quit that job, you will not be able to meet your daily needs, or you won't be able to provide, you won't be able to be autonomous and things of that nature, because the environment or the system that we live under means that we must have a way of earning or making a living in order for us to survive. And so sometimes it means that we find ourselves in situations or in environments that are not good for us, that keep injuring us, that keep traumatizing us. So what do we do? And these are some of the things a lot of us grapple with whenever we are talking about some of these issues. Whenever we're talking about a topic as trauma, some of these are realities for a lot of us. Some of us are able to leave some of this environment and take care of ourselves. Some of us are not able to do that. And we know that in order for any meaningful healing or any meaningful state of wellness to happen, you need to have a safe environment for that to occur. So if you're not able to do that, how then do you still make sure that you take care of yourself, or at least you're able to maintain a level of wellness, so that whatever injury is caused doesn't have some permanent mark on us? Now, what we can say is that some few things that you can do: seek out support groups or people who more or less you share the same kind of problem, because as long as you know that you have a support system, support goes a long way. So if you can seek out people who more or less you share the same kind of challenges, and because it's in that support that you will find somebody who has developed a coping mechanism or a way of surviving that might be helpful to you, that you might not get that information from another person. So support, especially with people who you have something in common, is very, very key in helping us to cope and helping us to start our healing journey. Then also establish routines that you stick to, so that they kind of help you to build a form of resilience. One of the ways, or one of the things that we know, is that if you, for example, have a nutritious diet, you have a pattern of exercise, have a pattern whereby you say that at least by this time I will make sure I go into bed so that I have rest, because these are some habits that also help our bodies to be able to heal and repair themselves and become strong, so that in case of an event like that, your body is in a position or in a capacity to be able to repair and to heal itself. So these are some of the things that you might want to think about as ways to be able to take care of yourself. And most importantly, reach out for professional help. One of the things you will find, especially now, we know that at least even here in Kenya, we have organizations such as Usikimye, which are working towards getting women, especially women who are in domestic abuse, into spaces whereby they are able at least to stabilize, just remove them from a space that is injuring them, get them to a safe space, and give them all the support as they're trying to repair and get a bit of a footing, so that at least they can start their life away from some of these injurious spaces. And a lot of churches also do provide support for people who are dealing with one issue or another. When you reach out to some of these organizations, while they might not per se have a specific solution to you, whatever it is that you're dealing with, but they could have a network of people who might have a specific solution for whatever it is you're dealing with. So takeaway is that trauma, we can't avoid it. As long as you're living in this world, you can't. However, there's always help and support as long as you seek it out. So thank you so much. For more information and consultation, you can get us through the number that is appearing on your screen. Thank you.